anything. But I'll ask the obvious, and again, anyone here who has any questions, Marsha will be happy to answer. A lot of things come to my mind. I think the one at the forefront would be this is incredible. This is unimaginable. I should say it's remarkable how throughout you remain composed. What do you think gives you the strength to continue in the way that you have, telling the story? Certainly moments then which are unimaginable. And the question is, what do you feel you can share with people who haven't been through situations like this, to help them try to understand what gives you the strength to continue to go on, to remain positive, to remain optimistic, notwithstanding what you have been through?
I think that I feel that I owe it to Yoni and his memory to have his name heard, and to have his name spoken, and to have him remembered. And I think that when somebody goes from this world, there's an energy, the life force of that person can still remain in this world if we want it to. And Yoni there was so much that he did, as I spoke about before, and so much that he still had to do, and I felt that if we could just keep his energy here, that this would mean that he wasn't lost to us forever, and that he wasn't lost to the world, and if we could find a way to harness that energy and to keep doing the things that he would have done, that was terribly important. And in doing that, I would be doing it for Yoni and doing it for me and myself and for the family, because there's no question that at the moment and for a long time afterwards, I just used to dream that I would lie down beside Yoni, and that's all that I ever wanted to do, really, was just lie down and just be with him. But it's just, I also remembered that when my father had passed away a few years before, my mother was and never has been the same person since, and I'm one of 4 siblings, and we felt that we just lost 2 parents, and I felt that was something I absolutely did not want my children to feel, that although we had gone through this terrible tragedy, I wanted them to feel that I was still the person I always was, and still there for them, and that we and that was something that was very important to me, that they should feel very secure, and that I was always a solid, secure place for them in their lives. And so we decided that the way to keep Yoni's energy in the world and to going on was so we created the Yoni Jesner Foundation, and it's mainly aimed at young people like yourselves and younger as well, to try and instill in them the qualities that Yoni had and the values that Yoni had. One of the things that we do in the foundation, which really was inspired by his aphorisms that we found in his rucksack, as well as his, the example. I mean, I remember that when he was too young to drive, and he used to go on his bike, and constantly, I hardly ever saw him at home during the week. I used to leave his supper out, and he would be rushing off to do something, and I remember thinking, I wonder if just by having his food ready and doing all this, and that I might get a wee tiny share of whatever he's doing in the world to come. There might be something there, you know, that I can share. And so we wanted to bring this to young people, and so we established the Yoni Jesner Awards. They run in schools every year. They're in all the main, I think just about all the Jewish schools, if not all of them, in London. And now this year they're starting in Liverpool as well, and they've gone into the first non-Jewish school. And it's we match the JVN, the Jewish Volunteer Network, matches children in the schools with volunteering opportunities, and they have to complete so many hours in the year. Some of them don't manage to do it and they fall by the wayside, but a great number. I mean, last summer we awarded, I think, 110 awards at the end of the year, and these children are they're about 13, on average about 13 years old, and I can see, and now this year we have, and if you look on the website, you can see the little films that they've made of what it's meant to them and what they've learned in the experience, and it starts them off with this feeling that there's a responsibility, that they have this communal awareness, this awareness that it's not just what can the world and what can society do for me, but it's what is my responsibility, and that is something that Yoni has had that within him, and I would love to inculcate that in young people, young kids in school, and it's my aim that we can have money in the foundation to make this run every year, so that by the time they leave school, they will feel that just doing things in the community is just part of life, and it's part of what you have to do, because who would the community be without us? But it goes on to the time at university, and it goes on to once they find jobs, and you know, I speak to different age groups, and really trying to get people to think about really what are they doing with their time and what are they doing with their life, because at the end of your life, what are you going to, you want to look back and see that your life is worth something, and that what you've done, like what Yoni did in such a short time, has affected so many people. And I still hear recently that somebody told me that they spoke to somebody, they were in China or Japan, I think it was China, and somehow Yoni's aphorisms had come to this person, and they, you know, constantly referred to them and looked to them, and that was just somebody who maybe didn't know very much about Yoni, but just his caring for his community and the way that he felt it has, and it still continues to have, such an amazing effect. And you know, after we're gone, all that really remains is, you know, the good that we did and what we pass on to our children. And, you know, doing good and trying to help others is something that makes you feel, as you go through life and you get older, into middle age and much older and much, much older, when you're really in old age and you look back, and I've spoken to people about this, and you look at your family, and that makes you feel your life was worthwhile, that you want to feel that you've made a difference. So you look to your children and how you brought them up and how they live their lives and what their values are. And this is what we want to help inculcate in people, actually people of all ages. It's just this responsibility. And I think that is how I've dealt with having lost Yoni, is trying to turn it around, because either you sink or you swim, you know, and either you can turn your terrible experience around into something positive, or it can just bring you down and you sink. There was another boy called Kobe Mandel who was murdered when he was 14 years old, a few years before Yoni, and his mother, they established the Kobe Mandel Foundation, and they help people who are dealing with trauma and who are living with loss through terrorism in Israel. A fantastic foundation, and she wrote a book called The Blessing of a Broken Heart, and it meant a lot to me that and she sees it in her way, makes her come closer to God. Everybody has their own way of what their blessing that they can find in their broken heart. And for me, it's in the foundation and the work of the foundation, and feeling that Yanni's life was very important, and the legacy that he left behind is something that still carries on today. So I guess if you ask me, how I deal with it, it's through, doing all these things that make me feel that Yanni is still close. He hasn't gone off into the ether, far, far away to be forgotten forever, but he's here with me all the time, and with lots and lots of people all the time. He's with Gideon in America. Gideon went on to study law. He dropped out first year because after what he had been through, he just didn't know what he wanted to do. Then he went back to university and studied law, and finally he went to America and became a rabbi, because he felt that actually that was the third time that he had just narrowly escaped death in a terrorist bombing within a year or so. It was the third time, and he felt that he really was here for a purpose, so it's turned his life into something different as well.
What more can you tell us in terms of Yanni? Obviously, just seeing him, observing him through the film, you get a certain feel as to who the person was. Very genuine, good, kind. Just mention a few things. What else can you tell us in terms of who he was? He's, obviously a special boy.
He just would make me feel better, and also, the family, just by being there, you felt he had this ability to be in charge, and everything was all right, and he would fix whatever it was, and he would go, from the time that my father died, he was often around my mother, although he was really quite young at that time. He was maybe 15. He spent more time with my mother, and if anything went wrong, my other sons were starting university at that time and were moving away, and he was the last one of my older children, because I also have another little girl from my second marriage, Yael, I spoke about. So he was, a great support. He was very solid and very, I'm trying to put into words, you would feel that everything was all right, as I said before, when he was there, but you had confidence when he was around, that he would know how to handle something, and he would know how to do, even though he was very young, and that nothing was really a problem. He was very meticulous about everything he did. When he sent letters or wrote letters or notes, he copied everything that he did. And in his bedroom, everything was in piles. Every activity that he was doing, things that he was preparing, everything was in piles and very highly organised. And he never got into a flap about anything. He was relaxed, and he was blessed with a wonderful brain. He really was blessed with a wonderful brain, because when I used to go to parents' night at school, I just used to come home on a cloud, because the teachers would say, we just don't know what to say, except his writing is really bad. Really bad, and I used to say, well, that's just wonderful. And because he was an all-rounder, so he had as many non-Jewish friends as Jewish friends, and he was always volunteering for things, and the teacher said he was just blessed with a wonderful brain, and that if he was in the class, one of the science teachers said it wasn't enough just to give over the lesson, he had to be ready immediately with the answers for the homework and for the next lesson, because he was asking the questions at the end of the lesson. So I think that was a great blessing that he had. I certainly don't have a brain like that, but because of that, so that gave him space in his head to do a lot of things as well. To me, he was a synthesis of my father and his other grandpa, because my father had a wonderful brain, and he was a doctor, and he had a lovely personality, and people would come to him with problems, and he was the person in the family everybody would go to. And his other grandpa was just ran the community in Glasgow, established the Collel and the mikvah and everything that was for Glasgow Jewry. He was on every committee that ever was. And so he was the synthesis of both of those grandpas, you know. Just an unusual person.
You mentioned that you met the mother of Kobe Mandel, who also had a son
Yes.
who was murdered. Have you met many other parents who have gone through similar experiences, and how did you find that? How, various responses, how to deal with situations like that? Have you found anything?
I've met a few
Have
people.
you inspired any of them?
Over the years, I found that when I've gone to Israel, I haven't had the time to do that, because every year, when I'd gone, I was working up to the end of last year, so I didn't have a lot of free time to go. But when I would go because I had another grandchild, because I have a lot of grandchildren now in Israel, and I always wanted to go, and I felt, I would love to have been part of that, but I haven't actually done that. But I have been, spoken over the years. Actually, when Yoni was killed at that time, a number of people who had lost children themselves came to the hotel where we sat. We didn't sit Shiva as such because it was just before Sukkot, so Yontif cancelled out the Shiva, but we were there for a week or so, or 10 days anyway. People came, and people were very kind, and yes, it's something that you have a bond with the people who I have met. But although I was very inspired by the Sherry Mandel, I haven't spent a lot of time with other people. I think that I think that part of me doesn't want to. I don't want to be dragged down, and so it's something that I do in my own way, and I have my own vision of what I want to do with this. But it's something that's in the back of my mind now that I am freer and have a bit more time on it when I go to Israel, that I would like to be part of some of their activities that they have.
Any questions?
It's not really a question.
Okay.
I just realise who you are.
It's more, you asked Marsha what else she could tell you about Yoni. And I knew Yoni quite well, and I have a joke in my head that Yoni always says, and people say that it's his favourite joke. So I think that there's a side to Yoni that is funny. That
Extremely.
this spirit that just lifted people was so true. And I'm 29 now, and I haven't met anybody in my life at all that is or makes the same impact as Johnny did. I think he was so unique, and I think that in the last 10 years I've sort of followed what Marsha's been doing, and we've all as a kind of community done it ourselves, and as friends. Oh dear, please don't. And I just think that the way that his memory can live on, because I feel like he's here. I personally feel very connected to him, but I feel like it's just in telling the story, because I've told so many people, and non-Jewish and Jewish, and it sticks in your mind, because you hear so many terrible things on the news, but you don't quite hear the background of them. And I think that telling Yoni's story and the person that he was is really how it lives on. And I think that's how it inspires people, because he was such an inspiring person. And I have so many friends who didn't know him and who know the story, and it's through that that makes an impact on our life, I think.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for that. Any questions? Simon?
Yeah, the film is such a graphic documentation, straight, a year after, so emotions were raw. I just wanted to ask you, how have you, when you look back at that film, it's almost 10 years, how have you changed as a person? Your Judaism, for example, your relationship to your other son. And the second part of my question would be the first time could you speak about the moment, the first time you discovered this wealth of, Yoni inside the rucksack? It sounded like there was this amazing, archive that you found and gained strength.
Yeah, yes, it was an amazing thing to find, and it was like, and I'm still finding things. Whenever I find something new of Yoni's, I feel that he's back with me, closer again. And it is like having, Yoni close. It's very hard to describe how it felt finding those. It was like finding treasure. If I had found a rucksack full of gold coins, or it just wouldn't have meant more. It was like, just grabbing something of him, of his deepest self, something more to know. Because I think that's the thing, you can't know any more about him. But I think through having the foundation and keeping his name alive, so people I'm finding out more things even now about him. And it feeds that great need to know more about him and to understand the person he was and all the different facets, and to try and keep in touch and get back in touch with people who I've lost touch with, over the years, friends of his, and building a picture. There's been, I need 3 of myself to do what I'm doing, to run the foundation, to do speaking and prepare for speaking and run the activities we do. And I would just love to write a book about Yoni and what everybody who knew him, let them contribute things and sort it out and have something like I have the documentary. I would love to have that sort of in a book as well. One day I will probably get around to doing it, but having the documentary was just wonderful for me at that point, because I really was desperate to go back. I wanted to go to Allenby Street, and I had gone back actually the year before. The documentary was done 2 years after. And I had gone to Allenby Street, and I had wandered up and down thinking, where was this, and where exactly was it? And I just couldn't bring myself to go into the shops and start asking people. And I wanted to go back to the hospital, and I wanted to meet the staff again. They were so amazing. Everything was in slow motion, because from 1 o'clock on a Thursday lunchtime, and then to go on the night flight to Israel and arrive at 5 in the morning and be at the hospital at 6, and then have meetings and deciding what to do by 10 o'clock. And then between those hours of 6 and 10, we forged relationships with the staff and the neurological team that you might not have in a lifetime. The closest relationships. And I wondered, maybe when we walk out the door, maybe they just forget all about us, because there'll be somebody else the next day and somebody else the day after that. And I wanted to go back and see, what was that, those relationships that we had formed, were they real, or were they just, part of their jobs or whatever? And anyway, was I really going to go into the hospital in the middle of a working day and disturb everybody, or get them home, and say, could I ask you this and that? So the documentary was a fantastic opportunity, and I was approached to do it, and a lot of people said, don't do it, because at the end of the day you have no say over the editing, and it could be something terrible. But I just felt that they were such a fine group of people, as they're all Scottish people, actually, and they'd seen an article that had been written in a local Scottish or Glasgow paper, and had wanted to do it. So we decided to go, and they just paved the way for me to go back and to relive things, but not in a bad way, but to sort of connect from what had happened 2 years before, and make new connections with all these things to be able to carry it on in my life. So we went back, as you saw, to the street, and I could understand more what had happened and how it had been. And then we went to the hospital, and so I had questions to ask. They did it in a way that, I was the one, it was my journey, so what did I want to ask? And I had the opportunity to say to them, which you don't see in that part of the documentaries. Later on, really, when I say to the girl, the transplant team, it really was very, very difficult for us to hear about this from a stranger over a phone, that Yoni's kidney had been given to a Palestinian girl, and how is that possible? Why didn't you tell us? I mean, really? And the girl looked at me so sweetly, and she said, well, we do tell. And I looked at her, okay, we do tell. You tell us. I didn't say that. I said, you do tell. She said, yes, we tell if you ask. And I said, right, I understand. And I really understood then. I mean, it really, more than I had understood right at the beginning, even more. I knew, this is something really to be proud of. This is really the way it should be. And when you go to Israel, when I was living in Israel for 4 years when the children were very little, and even now you see, Arabs walk into the hospitals there and they're treated. And this, just recently I actually went to visit the Palestinian family again a few weeks ago, and they could not say more wonderful things about how they were treated and are treated in the hospital now, because they have another son who has a problem. And that is something just to be so proud of. And I was glad to be able to go back and ask the question and to really put that into a slot. But the most wonderful thing was when all of the staff that I met, they just came towards me with their arms open, and as if they were long lost friends, and it was really something very special for me, because it meant that I felt that, and I feel now to this day that if I were to pick up the phone and phone any one of them and want to go and see them or talk about anything, that they are there for me, and they have been there. They were there then, but it's not just a momentary thing, and that was a wonderful thing for me. So the documentary has given me something very great, and as time goes on, there's no great wonderful thing that happens to you with these terrible things that you change, and you would think now we've reached 10 years, and sometimes I look back and I feel that, if I could draw a diagram of how it is, my relationship with Yoni now, that it's like I'm close to him and then he flies off and then he comes back, and he flies off and then I go looking for him and then I can't find him and then he's there and then he goes off again. It's the weirdest thing, and time is nothing. Sometimes it feels like I hardly can remember that he was really my son, that it could be real, and then other times you feel so close and I can just experience him totally again. So 10 years doesn't really mean anything. There's nothing magic that happens, and time doesn't make any difference. And it could have been 10 days ago, or it could have been 10 months ago, or it could have been, sometimes it could have been yesterday. And you can't call up emotions, and you just never know. I can go to the cemetery in Israel and I can't connect. Or I can be sitting in my home in Glasgow and I suddenly have this feeling about Yoni, and this emotional reaction to something that's completely, unexpected. So you just don't know.